The great hall of the Concord Assembly was filled with the roar of 1,000 voices. Representatives from 47 species stood beneath the golden dome, but none dared speak louder than the Vexari. They never did. High Warlord Kethraxis stood at the center of the platform, his scaled body towering over the others. His yellow eyes swept across the assembly with the calm confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. Behind him, massive screens displayed images of burning cities and fleeing ships. The Meldrani system had fallen. Another species had learned the price of resistance. 12,000 years, Kethraxis said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. For 12,000 years, the Vexari have brought order to this galaxy. Every species in this room exists because we allowed it. Every world you call home remains standing because we chose mercy. The assembly was silent. Some bowed their heads. Others simply stared at the floor. They had heard this speech before, in different forms, after every conquest. The Vexari loved to remind them of their place. Kethraxis smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Meldrani thought they could hide. They thought their little corner of space was beyond our reach. They were wrong, as all who defy the Concord are wrong. He raised his clawed hand, and the screens changed. Now they showed the Vexari war fleet, thousands of massive ships, stretching across the void of space. Each one was a weapon of terrible power. Each one had tasted victory countless times. We do not fear war, Kethraxis declared. War is our gift to the galaxy. Through war, we bring peace. Through conquest, we bring unity. This is the way it has always been. This is the way it will always be. The assembly erupted in forced applause. The representatives of the conquered species clapped because they had to. The Vexari clapped because they believed every word. In the back of the great hall, far from the lights and the noise, an old Thessian woman watched in silence. Her name was Uel, and she had served as ambassador for her people for over 60 years. Her species had been among the first to fall to the Vexari, so long ago that most had forgotten what freedom felt like. Uel did not clap. She simply watched Kethraxis with tired eyes. She had seen many high warlords come and go. They were all the same, drunk on power, blind to everything beyond their own glory. But lately, something had been troubling her. Something she could not explain. After the assembly ended, Uel returned to her small office in the lower levels of the station. It was a modest room, filled with old books and ancient equipment. The Vexari allowed her to keep it because they found her harmless. An old woman playing with old machines. What threat could she possibly be? She sat down at her desk and activated the device she had been building in secret for the past decade. It was a long-range signal receiver, far more powerful than anything the Concord officially possessed. Uel had spent years gathering parts, hiding her work, waiting for something she could not name. The screen flickered to life, showing waves of data from the far edges of known space. Most of it was noise, random signals from dead stars and empty systems. But 3 weeks ago, she had found something different. A pattern. A repeating signal from a region of space that the Concord had never explored. The Outer Rim, they called it. A vast stretch of nothing, too far from anything useful to bother with. The Vexari had sent a few patrol ships there over the centuries, but they had found only empty worlds and silence. Until now. Uel studied the signal again. It was not natural. Someone had created it. Someone was out there, watching. She had tried to bring this to the attention of the Concord leadership. She had requested a meeting with the military council, but they had laughed at her. An old Thessian woman claiming to have found something the mighty Vexari fleet had missed. Impossible. There is nothing in the Outer Rim, the Admiral had told her. Nothing but rocks and dust. Go back to your books, Ambassador. Leave the real work to us. Uel had not argued. She had learned long ago that arguing with the Vexari only brought pain, but she had not stopped listening. The signal continued, night after night. And then, 1 week ago, it had changed. The pattern shifted. It became something new, something that looked almost like a warning. She did not know who was sending it. She did not know what it meant. But deep in her old bones, she felt something she had not felt in decades. Fear. Meanwhile, in the command center of the Vexari homeworld, preparations were underway for the next great conquest. The Outer Rim territories had been marked for expansion. There were reports of mineral-rich planets, easy targets with no significant defenses. It would be a simple campaign, barely worth the effort. High Warlord Kethraxis reviewed the plans with his admirals. They spoke of glory and easy victory. They joked about what primitive species they might find hiding in the darkness. Perhaps they would make good slaves. Perhaps they would simply be exterminated. Either way, it did not matter. Send 3 patrol fleets, Kethraxis ordered. Establish forward bases. Claim everything in our name. The admirals bowed and left to carry out his commands. Kethraxis remained alone, staring at the star map. The outer rim was vast, millions of light-years of unexplored space, but what could possibly be hiding there that the Vixari could not crush? Nothing, he told himself. There was nothing in the universe that could challenge his people. They had proven this 1,000 times over. 2 months passed. The patrol fleets reached the outer rim and began their survey. Reports came back regularly, at first empty systems, dead planets, nothing of interest. The admirals grew bored. Some suggested recalling the fleets and focusing on more productive campaigns. Then the reports stopped. The first fleet went silent without warning. One moment they were sending routine updates. The next, nothing. The Concord assumed it was a technical failure and sent a second fleet to investigate. The second fleet also went silent. Now Kethraxis was paying attention. He ordered the third fleet to approach with caution. Weapons ready. They were to find out what had happened and report back immediately. For 3 days, there was nothing. Then, on the 4th day, a single transmission arrived. It was not a distress call. It was not a report. It was a reply to the countless hails the Vexari had sent into the void. A voice spoke calm, cold, and unlike anything they had ever heard. You should not have come. The transmission ended. The third fleet was never heard from again. In her small office, UL watched her screen as the Concorde descended into chaos. Emergency meetings were called. Admirals shouted at each other. Kethraxis demanded answers that no one could give. The old woman leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The signal from the outer rim had stopped. Whoever had been watching, whatever had been waiting, it was no longer content to simply observe. Something was coming. And for the first time in 12,000 years, UL wondered if the Vixari had finally found something they could not conquer. She whispered to herself in the darkness of her room, words her grandmother had taught her long ago. Before the Vixari came, before everything changed, pride comes before the fall. The galaxy was about to learn what those words truly meant. 6 months had passed since the patrol fleets vanished into the darkness of the outer rim. 6 months of fear, confusion, and rage. The Vexari did not know how to handle mystery. They only knew how to handle war. High Warlord Kethraxis stood on the bridge of his personal warship, watching as the 4th Devastation Fleet assembled around him. 500 ships of death, the pride of the Concord military. Massive dreadnoughts with weapons that could crack planets in half. Carrier ships filled with thousands of fighters. Support vessels carrying enough troops to conquer entire systems. Admiral Sithrak commanded this fleet. He was old for a Vexari, with scars covering his face from 100 battles. He had never lost a fight in his entire life. He did not plan to start now. Whatever killed our patrols will die today, Sithrak said, his voice hard as stone. We will find them. We will crush them. And we will bring their heads back to display in the Great Hall. His officers roared their approval. They were eager for blood. The waiting had made them hungry. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, racing toward the coordinates where the last patrol had disappeared. The journey took several days. During that time, Sithrak studied every piece of information they had about the outer rim. There was almost nothing useful. Ancient surveys that showed empty space. A few reports of strange signals that had been dismissed as sensor errors. And now, 3 missing fleets. When they finally arrived, the sight that greeted them made even the hardened Vexari warriors pause. The remains of their patrol ships floated in the void like broken toys. Hundreds of vessels, torn apart with impossible precision. There were no blast marks from weapons fire, no signs of explosions or battles. The ships had simply been taken apart, piece by piece, as if something had studied them and then disassembled them like a child taking apart a puzzle. What could do this? One officer whispered. Sithrak did not answer. His eyes scanned the debris field, searching for any sign of the enemy. But there was nothing. Only silence and death. Spread out, he ordered. Find them. The fleet moved forward slowly, sensors scanning in every direction. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing appeared. Some officers began to wonder if the enemy had fled. Perhaps they had seen the might of the devastation fleet and run away in terror. Then, without warning, a single ship appeared. It emerged from a fold in space itself, a ripple of light that opened and closed in an instant. The ship was small, barely larger than a shuttle. It was gray and simple, with no visible weapons. It looked almost harmless. Unknown vessel. Sithrak broadcast. Identify yourself or be destroyed. The reply came immediately. A face appeared on every screen in the fleet, a strange face, soft and pale, with 2 eyes and hair like black silk. It was a female, though her species was unknown to them. She wore a simple uniform with a symbol on her chest, a blue sphere with green and brown patches. Earth, though the Vexari did not know this yet. I am Captain Elena Vance of the UNS Messenger, the female said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. I represent the Terran Confederacy. We have been watching you for some time. Sithrak leaned forward. You destroyed our patrols. They refused to leave our space. Captain Vance replied. They fired first. We responded. Your space? Sithrak laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. Nothing in this galaxy belongs to anyone but the Concord. You are either with us or against us. There is no other choice. Captain Vance did not react to his threat. Her expression remained perfectly calm. Then I will deliver our terms. The Vexari Concord will release all enslaved species within its borders. You will dismantle your military forces. Your leaders will stand trial for crimes against sentient life. These terms are not negotiable. For a long moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then Sithrak began to laugh again, louder this time. His officers joined him. The idea that this small ship and its soft-faced captain could give orders to the Concord was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Little creature, Sithrak said, wiping tears from his eyes. You have made a terrible mistake. Destroy her. 100 weapons locked onto the messenger. 100 fingers pressed firing triggers. Beams of energy and missiles raced toward the tiny ship. They hit nothing. The messenger simply vanished. One moment it was there. The next, it was gone. In its place, floating in empty space, was a small device. Numbers glowed on its surface, counting down from 60. Sithrak frowned. What is this? No one answered. They watched the numbers fall. 60, 50, 40. Some officers began to feel something strange in their stomachs, something they had never felt before. 30, 20, 10, 0. Space itself seemed to tear open. Holes appeared everywhere, hundreds of them, thousands of them, and from each hole came ships, human ships. They were massive. The smallest was twice the size of a Vexari dreadnought. The largest were like moving mountains, bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained power. They filled the void in every direction, surrounding the devastation fleet completely. 200 warships, each one more advanced than anything the Concord had ever built, and they did not fire. They simply waited. The messenger reappeared directly in front of Sithrak's flagship. Captain Vance's face returned to the screens. Her expression had not changed. That was your warning, she said. You now have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender. If you do not, we will disable your fleet. You will not be given another chance. Sithrak stared at the wall of ships surrounding him. For the first time in his long life, he felt something cold crawling through his blood. Doubt. Fear. He pushed it away with all his strength. Vexari, do not surrender, he growled. All ships, attack. The 4th devastation fleet charged forward. 500 ships firing everything they had. The void lit up with the light of 1,000 weapons. 9 minutes later, it was over. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. Not one had even been seriously damaged. Their shields absorbed everything the Vexari threw at them like raindrops falling on stone. But the human response had been precise and devastating. Engines were destroyed, weapons were disabled, power systems were shut down. Ship after ship went dark, drifting helplessly in space. The Vexari crews found themselves alive but completely powerless. Sithrak's flagship was the last to fall. He had ordered ramming attacks, suicide charges, every desperate tactic he could think of. Nothing worked. The humans seemed to know what he would do before he did it. When his ship finally lost power, Sithrak sat in his command chair and stared at the darkness around him. His hands were shaking. He could not make them stop. The messenger approached. Captain Vance's face appeared one final time. "Your crews will be collected and returned to Concord space," she said. "You will deliver a message to your leaders. Tell them what happened here. Tell them we offered peace and you chose war. Tell them that if they wish to avoid the same fate, they will accept our terms." Sithrak found his voice. It came out as a whisper. What are you?" For the first time, something like emotion crossed Captain Vance's face. It might have been sadness. It might have been pity. "We are humanity," she said. "We do not want war. We have seen too much of it. But we will not allow what you have done to continue. The choice is yours now. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. The human fleet began collecting the disabled Vexari ships, handling them with care that seemed almost gentle. Admiral Sithrak sat alone in the darkness, the greatest warrior of the conquered, undefeated in 100 battles. He had just been crushed in 9 minutes by an enemy he had never known existed, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought began to form, a thought that would haunt him for the rest of his days. What if they had been holding back? The news spread through the Concord like fire through dry grass. The 4th Devastation Fleet, 500 of their mightiest warships, had been destroyed in minutes. Admiral Sithrak, the legendary warrior who had never known defeat, had been sent home like a scolded child, and the enemy had not lost a single ship. High Warlord Kethraxis refused to believe it at first. He screamed at his advisors. He demanded new reports. He accused Sithrak of cowardice and lies, but the evidence was impossible to deny. The surviving crews told the same story. Their ships had been helpless. Their weapons had been useless. The humans had taken them apart like they were nothing. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Concord faced an enemy it did not understand. In her small office, Ambassador Ul watched the chaos unfold. The Vexari were panicking. Their leaders held emergency meetings that lasted for days. Their military scrambled to understand what they were facing, and for the first time, they came to her. "You detected their signals first," the military council told her. "Find out everything you can about these humans. We need to know their weaknesses." Ul accepted the task without argument, but she already suspected what she would find. She had felt it in her bones since the first signal arrived from the outer rim. These humans were not like other species. There was something different about them, something dangerous. She began her research in the ancient archives. The Concord kept records of every species they had encountered, those they had conquered, those they had destroyed, and those they had ignored. Somewhere in those records, there had to be something about the humans. She searched for weeks, and finally, buried in files that had not been opened in 8,000 years, she found it. Earth, a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. It had been surveyed by a Vexari scout ship long before the current empire existed. The report was brief and dismissive. Primitive species, it read, divided into thousands of warring tribes. Technology level, pre-spaceflight. No significant resources. Planet marked as unsuitable for colonization due to unstable native population. Recommendation: ignore and revisit in 10,000 years. The scout had moved on. The Vexari had forgotten about the small blue world. After all, what threat could a bunch of primitives possibly pose? But Ul kept reading. She accessed human transmissions that the Conquered had intercepted over the centuries, radio signals, television broadcasts, data streams that had leaked into space. Most of it had been dismissed as noise. No one had bothered to translate it. Ul translated it now, and what she found made her blood run cold. The humans had not spent the last 8,000 years in peace. They had spent it in war. Constant, terrible, unending war. They had fought over land. They had fought over resources. They had fought over ideas, beliefs, and the color of each other's skin. They had invented weapons of horrifying power bombs that could destroy entire cities in a flash of light. And then, 500 years ago, they had nearly destroyed themselves. The records called it the Third World War. The humans had finally pushed too far. Their weapons had been unleashed. Cities burned. Millions died. The planet itself was scarred with wounds that took centuries to heal. Ul watched recordings of the aftermath. Gray skies filled with ash. Survivors crawling through the ruins of their civilization. Children crying for parents who would never come. Any other species would have died. The Vexari certainly would have. They would have turned on each other. fighting over the scraps until nothing remained. But the humans did something different. They stopped. Not immediately. Not easily. It took decades of suffering. But slowly, painfully, they began to work together. Old enemies became allies. Ancient hatreds were set aside. The survivors looked at the ashes of their world and made a choice. Never again. They rebuilt their civilization from the ground up. They created a unified government that represented all of humanity. They developed new technologies not for war, but for survival. They reached for the stars not to conquer, but to escape. To find new homes. To ensure that even if one world died, humanity would live on. And they remembered. Every human child learned the history of the Great Wars. They visited the memorials. They studied the names of the dead. The horror of what they had almost done was burned into their souls. UL found a human saying that captured it perfectly. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. The humans had not forgotten. They never would. But there was more. As humanity spread through their corner of space, they had encountered other species. Most were peaceful. Some were not. And the humans had learned something else in those encounters. The galaxy was not kind. They had found the ruins of civilizations destroyed by war. They had met refugees fleeing from conquering empires. They had seen what happened to species who could not defend themselves. And so, quietly, carefully, humanity had prepared. They built ships. They trained soldiers. They developed weapons that made their old nuclear bombs look like toys. Not because they wanted war, but because they knew that someday, war would find them. They had watched the Vexari Concord grow for centuries. They had seen the conquered species cry out for help. They had recorded every atrocity, every massacre, every world burned and every people enslaved, and they had waited. UL understood now. The humans were not conquerors. They were not warriors who loved battle for its own sake. They were survivors. They had looked into the face of extinction and walked away, changed forever. To them, war was not a game. It was not a path to glory. It was the end of everything. And they would only fight when there was no other choice. But when they did fight, they fought to win. Completely. Totally. Without mercy or hesitation. Because they understood something the Vexari never had. In war, there was no second place. There was only victory or death. UL brought her findings to the military council. She explained what she had learned. She showed them the recordings, the history, the terrible weapons the humans had created. They are not like us, she said. They do not see war as we do. To them, it is a last resort. But when they commit to it, they commit completely. They will not stop until the threat is eliminated. They cannot stop. Their entire culture is built around the memory of what happens when they fail. Kethraxis listened in silence. His face was unreadable. You are saying we cannot defeat them, he said finally. UL hesitated. I am saying that if we fight them, we must be prepared to lose everything. They will not accept surrender. They will not negotiate terms. They have already given us their demands. Accept or face the consequences. Kethraxis stood. His eyes burned with cold fury. The Vexari have never surrendered, he said. We will not start now. If these humans want a war, we will give them one. Summon every ship in the Concord, every species, every fleet, every weapon. We will show them what 12,000 years of conquest looks like. UL closed her eyes. She had known this would be his response. The Vexari could not imagine defeat. They could not comprehend an enemy stronger than themselves, but she had seen the human recordings. She had watched their history. And she knew something Kethraxis did not. The humans had been waiting for this moment. Not with fear, not with doubt, but with grim, terrible patience. They had hoped it would never come, but they had always known it would. As she left the council chamber, UL looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Human Armada was gathering. Millions of ships, built over centuries, crewed by soldiers who understood the true cost of war. They were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The void of Karnash was a dead system at the edge of Concord space. No planets worth colonizing, no resources worth taking, just empty darkness stretching in every direction. It was the perfect place for what was about to happen. High Warlord Kethraxis had called for the greatest fleet in galactic history. Every species in the Concord had been forced to send their ships. Every hidden reserve had been emptied. Every retired vessel had been brought back into service. 6,000 warships now filled the void. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, an endless sea of metal and fire. It was a force that could have conquered 100 worlds. A force that had taken 12,000 years to build. Kethraxis stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around him, his admirals waited in nervous silence. Even the most confident among them felt a shadow of doubt. The reports from the Outer Rim had shaken them all, but Kethraxis showed no fear. He had spent his entire life preparing for war. He had crushed rebellions, exterminated species, burned worlds to ash. He would not be defeated by some unknown enemy from the darkness. Today, we remind the galaxy why they fear us, he said, his voice carrying across the bridge. Today, we show these humans what happens to those who challenge the Concord. They may have won one battle through trickery. They will not win another. His officers roared their approval. The fleet began its final preparations. Weapons were charged. Shields were raised. Fighters launched from their carriers and formed protective screens around the larger vessels. Then the humans arrived. They came from everywhere at once. Tiers in space opened across the void, not hundreds, but thousands. Ships poured through like water breaking through a dam. Small, medium, large, and then larger still. Vessels the size of small moons. Carriers that could hold entire fleets within their hulls. Weapons, platforms that bristled with technology the Concord had never imagined. The sensors on Kethraxis' ship went mad trying to count them. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. The numbers kept climbing. The Human Armada filled the void like stars filling the night sky. At the center of this impossible fleet floated a single ship larger than all the others. The UNS Leviathan flagship of the Terran Confederacy. 5 kilometers of dark metal and glowing engines. It moved with the slow grace of a creature that had nothing to fear. A transmission came through. A human male appeared on the screens. His face was weathered, his hair gray, his eyes tired but determined. He wore a simple uniform with the same blue and green symbol Captain Vance had worn. "I am Admiral Jonathan Mercer, Supreme Commander of the Terran Navy," he said. "High Warlord Kethraxis, I am giving you one final chance. Stand down your fleet. Release the enslaved species of your empire. Submit to judgment for your crimes. No more blood needs to be spilled today." Kethraxis laughed. It was a hollow sound, even to his own ears. "You think your numbers frighten me? We are Vexari. We have conquered the galaxy. We do not surrender to anyone." Admiral Mercer's expression did not change. "Then you have chosen your fate. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your souls." The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. The two fleets faced each other across the void, 6,000 against 3 million. It should have been a slaughter. And it was, just not the kind the Vexari expected. Kethraxis gave the order to attack. His fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, screaming war cries across every channel. They threw everything they had at the human lines. The humans did not even bother to dodge. Their shields absorbed the Concord weapons like they were gentle breezes. Energy beams splashed harmlessly against barriers that glowed briefly and then faded. Missiles exploded far from their targets, stopped by invisible walls. Then the humans fired back. Their weapons were unlike anything the Concord had ever seen. Beams of light that curved around obstacles and struck their targets with perfect accuracy. Projectiles that moved faster than sensors could track. Pulses of energy that passed through shields as if they did not exist. But the strangest thing was what these weapons did. They did not destroy. Vexari ships went dark, their engines disabled, their weapons offline, their crews unharmed but helpless. The humans were not trying to kill them. They were capturing them, thousands of vessels, taken intact in minutes. Kethraxis watched in horror as his mighty fleet was dismantled piece by piece. His admirals screamed orders that accomplished nothing. His warriors fired weapons that hit nothing important. The battle was not a battle at all. It was a demonstration. "They are playing with us," one admiral whispered. "They could destroy us in seconds. Why don't they?" Kethraxis had no answer. He had spent his entire life believing in the glory of war, in the honor of combat, in the righteous power of the strong over the weak. Now he was seeing something different. The humans were not warriors seeking glory. They were exterminators dealing with a pest. They were doctors removing a disease. They took no joy in the fighting. They simply did what needed to be done. 1 hour into the battle, the Concorde fleet had lost 90% of its ships. Most were drifting, disabled but intact. Some had been destroyed, those that had gotten too close to human vessels, those whose reactors had overloaded during the fighting. But the death toll was far lower than it should have been. The humans were trying to minimize casualties. Even now, even in the middle of war, they were trying to save lives. It was this realization that finally broke Kethraxis. Not the defeat, not the humiliation, but the understanding that his enemies were better than him in every way. They were stronger, yes, but they were also more merciful, more controlled, more civilized. Everything the Vexari had built, everything they believed about themselves, was a lie. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were its disease. In a final act of desperate rage, Kethraxis ordered his flagship to charge at the Leviathan. If he could not win, he would die with honor. He would ram the human commander's ship and take him down together. The Eternal Dominion accelerated toward the massive vessel. Every remaining weapon fired. Every engine burned at maximum power. Kethraxis stood on his bridge with his teeth bared, waiting for the end. It never came. A single human cruiser moved into his path. The UNS Prometheus, a ship that should have been destroyed by the collision. Instead, it activated some kind of energy field that absorbed the impact. The Eternal Dominion slammed into the barrier and stopped dead. Its hull crumpled but intact. When Kethraxis opened his eyes, he found his ship drifting helplessly. The bridge was silent. His crew stared at their useless controls in shock. A boarding party arrived within minutes. Human soldiers in gray armor, calm, professional, utterly without malice. They took Kethraxis and his officers into custody with minimal force. He was brought before Admiral Mercer on the deck of the Prometheus. The human commander looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only sadness. "You could have chosen peace," Mercer said quietly. "We gave you every chance. We did not want this war." Kethraxis found his voice. "Then why? Why build such a fleet? Why wait in the darkness?" Mercer was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of ages. "Because we knew, someday, something like you would come. And we swore never again. Never again would we let tyrants rule. Never again would we watch the innocent suffer while we did nothing." He paused. "We built this armada hoping we would never use it. But we always knew we would." Kethraxis looked into the human's eyes and saw something terrifying. Not anger, not triumph, just absolute, unshakable certainty. The humans had won. And now, everything would change. "What happens now?" Kethraxis asked. Mercer turned to look out at the void, where millions of human ships were already beginning the long work of bringing order to the chaos. "Now," he said, "you witness what humanity does to those who choose extinction. We rebuild. We heal, and we make sure this never happens again." 1 year had passed, since the Battle of Karnash. 1 year since the greatest military force in galactic history had been humbled in a matter of hours. 1 year since everything changed. The Vexari Concorde was no more. Its fleets were gone. Its armies were disbanded. Its leaders faced trial for crimes that spanned millennia, across 1,000 worlds. Species that had lived in chains for generations finally breathed free air. The humans had kept their promise. They had not come as conquerors. They had come as liberators. On the former throne world of Vexar Prime, the transformation was visible everywhere. The great palace of the High Warlords had been converted into a museum, a monument to the horrors of the old empire and the hope of the new age. Statues of conquerors had been torn down. In their place stood memorials to those who had suffered and died under Vexari rule. And the humans were everywhere, not as occupiers, but as helpers. They worked alongside former slaves to rebuild shattered cities. They brought food to worlds that had been stripped bare. They offered technology freely, asking nothing in return but a promise. Never again. Ambassador Ul walked through the halls of the museum with slow, careful steps. Her old bones ached, but she refused to rest. There was too much to see, too much to understand. She found what she was looking for in a small room near the back of the building. A simple cell with a single window. Inside, sitting on a plain bed, was High Warlord Kethraxis. The former ruler of the galaxy looked smaller now. His scales had lost their shine. His eyes had lost their fire. He was not beaten or abused. The humans had treated him fairly, even kindly. But something inside him had broken at Karnash, something that would never heal. "You came," he said without looking up. Ul sat down across from him. "I wanted to see you one more time. To understand." "Understand what? My failure? My foolishness?" He laughed bitterly. "I spent my whole life believing we were the greatest species in the galaxy. We were gods among insects. No one could challenge us." He finally met her eyes. "I was wrong." Ul nodded slowly. "You were wrong. But that is not what I came to understand." "Then what?" She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I came to understand why they showed mercy. The humans could have destroyed your entire species. They had the power. Many would say they had the right. After everything the Vexari did, after all the suffering you caused, no one would have blamed them." Kethraxis flinched. He knew she spoke the truth, but they didn't. Ul continued. "They stopped your military. They freed your slaves. They put your leaders on trial. But they did not commit genocide. They did not burn your worlds or slaughter your children." She leaned forward. "Why do you think that is?" The former warlord had no answer. He had been asking himself the same question for a year. Ul stood and walked to the window. Outside, a group of Vexari children were playing with children from other species, laughing, running, free from the hatred their parents had been taught. "I asked Admiral Mercer that question," Ul said. "Do you know what he told me?" Kethraxis shook his head. He said, "We don't fight to destroy. We fight so that no one else has to. The humans understand something. Your people never did. War is not glory. War is horror. They learned this through their own suffering, their own near extinction. And they swore that they would never become the monsters they fought against." She turned back to face him. "They showed mercy because mercy is strength. True strength. The kind your empire never had." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the children continued to play. Somewhere in the distance, construction machines hummed as new buildings rose from the ruins of the old. "What will happen to me?" Kethraxis finally asked. "You will face trial. You will answer for your crimes. But you will not be executed. The humans do not believe in revenge." She paused. "They believe in redemption. They think that even you can change. That even the Vexari can learn to be better." Kethraxis laughed again. But this time there was no bitterness in it. Just exhaustion. And perhaps, deep down, the smallest seed of hope. "I do not know if I can change," he admitted. "Neither do I," Ul said honestly. "But the humans are willing to give you the chance. That is more than your people ever gave anyone." She left him alone with his thoughts. 3 months later, the great memorial was completed. It hung in orbit above Vexor Prime, a massive structure of crystal and light, visible from the surface even in daylight. On its walls were carved the names of every species the Vexari had exterminated. Millions of names. Millions of stories that would never be told. The dedication ceremony drew representatives from across the galaxy. Former slaves stood beside their former masters. Humans worked alongside Vexari to place the final pieces. For the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy was truly united, not through conquest, but through shared sorrow and shared hope. Admiral Elena Vance, promoted after her actions at First Contact, stood before the crowd. She wore her uniform simply, without medals or decorations. The humans did not celebrate war, even victorious war. "We built this memorial not to shame the Vexari," she said, her voice carrying across the silent gathering. "We built it to remember, to ensure that the galaxy never forgets what happened here, never forgets the price of tyranny, never forgets the cost of looking away while evil grows." She paused, looking out at the faces before her. Vexari, Thessians, Meldrani, 100 species, united at last. "My people have a saying. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. We will not forget. We will not allow anyone to forget. And we will stand guard, from now until the end of time, to make sure this never happens again." She stepped back. The memorial lit up with soft light, a beacon visible across the entire system. In the crowd, Ul stood beside a young Vexari woman. The woman held a small child in her arms, a little girl with bright eyes and curious hands. "What are those lights, grandmother?" the child asked. The woman looked up at the memorial. She had grown up under the Empire, trained to believe in conquest and glory. But now, watching her daughter gaze at the lights, she felt something new stirring in her heart. Those are the humans. Little one, she said softly. They watch over us all now. They protect us. Are they good? The child asked. The woman thought about everything she had seen. The battle, the liberation, the trials, the rebuilding, the patience, the mercy. Yes, she said finally. They are good, and we are grateful. UL smiled and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Human Armada still waited, not to conquer, not to threaten, just to watch, just to protect, just in case. A message echoed across the galaxy, not on any channel, not through any transmitter, but in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the great change. A promise from the Terran Confederacy, a vow that would last forever. We do not seek war. We have seen too much of it. We have buried too many of our children in its fires. We have wept too many tears over its ashes. We will never seek war. But if war finds the innocent, if tyrants rise again, if the strong prey upon the weak, we will be there. We will stand in the way. We will do what must be done, not for glory, not for conquest, not for revenge, but because it is right, because someone must, because we remember. We are humanity, and we will never forget. The lights of the memorial shone on through the endless night, and across the galaxy, for the first time in 12,000 years, the innocent slept without fear. A new dawn had come,